Good morning, everybody. Most Americans are familiar with the successful landing on the French coast, June 6, 1944, which we know as D-Day. But the success of D-Day was partly based on what happened on this date, August 19, 1942, when the Allies did a raid on the French coastal town of Dieppe. And that was a disaster. But it offered many lessons which were applied later on D-Day. In 1940, Germany invaded France and defeated the French army, and the British army evacuated back to England at Dunkirk. So the British lived to fight another day. So during the summer and fall of 1940, the RAF, the Royal Air Force, fought the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, in what we know as the Battle of Britain. And eventually the Brits were successful. So things were kind of at a stalemate until 1941 when Germany invaded Russia. So now Britain, the RAF, was looking for a way to fight the Luftwaffe, and they learned from the code breakers using machines like this one, the Ultra program, that if they attacked a port, the Luftwaffe would respond. And the Luftwaffe had a new airplane, the FW-190, which the RAF was eager to fight. But the RAF, they were limited by fuel to how deep they could go into Germany. So they decided to attack a French port, partly because Joe Stalin was getting hammered by the Germans in the summer of 1942, and he wanted the Allies to respond, to take some of the heat off. So they picked Dieppe, a little town in the middle of the picture here on the French coast. And the idea was to use about 7,000 soldiers, 5,000 Canadian and 2,000 British, with 50 American Rangers, and attack 6 different beaches in the Dieppe area. The British did not use their big battleships to shell the beach because they had lost some of these to the Japanese by torpedoes, so they didn't do that. They did have landing craft, and this was a real test of fire for them. They also modified some tanks to see if they could work in shallow water. They didn't know how good they would be on the beach. Well, the Germans were not surprised. They'd been tipped off by intelligence that something was afoot. They had tons of weapons and guys. The German Navy, the patrol boats, actually tipped off the soldiers on the beach the morning of the attack, which was on this date, August 19. The tanks didn't swim, they foundered, they couldn't get traction on the beach, and as the soldiers attacked in various beaches, they were just slaughtered. Only one of the 6 beaches actually was successful for the Allies. Many were captured, especially Canadians. This was a real bloodbath for Canada. Here's a photo after the battle. You can see the beaches are strewn with tanks that just didn't go anywhere. Well, for the Canadians, the newspapers initially reported it as a success, but it was really a disaster. They had about a 60% casualty rate. Lessons learned for D-Day. Well, one is you need a beach that will take heavy equipment. This is one of the beaches in Normandy, and here's the photo. You all know it. The beach is swarming with vehicles, so that was one lesson they learned at Dieppe. You need a good beach. This is a warship at D-Day. Shelling the beach, they didn't do this at Dieppe very well. On D-Day, they brought over portable harbors from Britain. They floated them over. They were known as mulberries, and some of them are still in the water today. But the idea was if you destroy a port, you can't really use it. So let's bring our own port with us. On D-Day, they also used paratroopers. Here's a map from where they landed. They didn't do that at Dieppe. So a lot of lessons learned. So in that whole area by the English Channel, you can see fortifications left over from World War II. If you go to Dieppe, you can visit this memorial to the Canadian dead, the cemetery buried in the German fashion with the headstones next to each other. So Dieppe pretty place today to visit, bloody place in 1942, but lessons learned that really helped on D-Day.